Again, you're probably skipping around this video quite a bit, but I'm harping these staples, basically these basics to get down. Sine wave, triangle wave, something like that is a basis. Saturation, add a little bit of extra whatever you want to taste. Chorus, phaser, compression. You can even add reverb sometimes depending on what kind of bass sound it is, but you're gonna have to experiment with that. Bit of salt and pepper, a bit of butter, a bit of sugar, you know, just to add something else to the palate. Food analogies work with synthesis and music production very well, as you know. What's going on, everyone? It's Winslow here, and we're gonna talk about some simple bass sounds today and how to make them. Just some basics. It really does start with basic sounds, basic waves, and just subtle filtering, subtle effects, saturation, things like that, to get a nice weighty sound that just provides foundation for a tune. Usually you're gonna hear it, something like this is gonna be like, just pick a liquid song, and you'll hear something like that. But it can be applied to, you know, any other thing. It's really just the basics of synthesis almost, and subtle tweaks here and there to get character or movement or whatever you're going for. So that's what I'm gonna talk about today. So just give you a little outline. I actually made notes this time around. We're gonna go through some basics from just like the waves you pick, sine waves, things like that. Your envelope shaping, so bad at this. Subtle saturation, tongue twister right there. Yeah. Then we're gonna go, you know, take it up a notch, start combining waves, try things like that. Add a bit of interest using choruses or phasers, maybe detuning, adding different pitches to it, you know. And yeah, I'm just go through it. So if this is interesting, take a seat. Hopefully it won't take forever. Do a bit of editing like I normally do. And I'll try to keep everything in plugin as well. So my go-to plugin is Silent, but you can use any one you want. Doesn't matter what kind of synth it is, whether it's subtractive, additive, FM, serum. It's all going from basics. Okay? So a little bit less talking. Here we go. So what I would normally do if I'm coming up to add a patch like this, I would just init synth, something like that. All right. Now from here, if you're going for a bass sound and you want a nice bit of weight, usually a sine wave is the way to go. Put in the bass range. Honestly, that's good enough, but sometimes it doesn't feel like that. So maybe you want a bit more character to it, not quite a sine wave. Triangle waves work really well for this because now you have that grit. You can also see a bit of the, why am I pointing to my screen like you can see it? The upper harmonics and a bit of noise and grit up there. So sine wave, yeah, pure tone. Nothing but that. Triangle wave, bit more interest up in the mid range. Now, you can go something like a square wave, but what that's going to introduce is a lot of high frequency just mess, but it does have a lot of character that can be used. But when as you introduce more high frequencies, you want it to be a bass sound, so you're going to eventually filter those off with low pass. Again, it's about simple sounds. So that's really is your bass. Any other kind of wave you want to try, wavetables, things like that, go for it. But the most weight you're going to get is going to be pure tones. So your sine wave, your triangle wave, things like that. That's that roundness, that the weight you get from it is what gives you that strength. But you also have the caveat that it takes up a lot of energy, especially when it's down there in the low end. A sine wave takes a lot of power and it can suck a lot of energy out of your mix if it's overdone. So you have to be a bit careful. Yeah. So from there, let's say we take that sine wave, basic sine wave. I'm gonna take this filter off real quick because you don't need it. It's a sine wave, one tone. Now let's say we have a little bass line. I just had one going up in steps, and that's not quite it because it's too high. Put that in right. So yeah. Now that's how many caliber tunes sound just like that. I'm joking, but you get the similarities. It's the simplicity of it. Sometimes it does seem like it a bit more, but to add interest, we're going to do a bit of subtle saturation. So you can go within your own plugin. It's mostly going to be overdrive. If you do it subtly, you start eking out a bit more of the upper harmonics. You know, you add a bit more interest to the sound, and it'll help it speak a bit more, and also take a little bit less of less room down in the low end. So I just turned it on. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, now you're starting to see a bit more up top. Yep, you can hear the upper harmonics. So harmonics are going to be, you get really technical about this, but they're going to be overtones basically. So you're going to hear that, you're going to hear the pure tone. Boom. That's like the lowest of my range. But you're also, when you add harmonics, you're going to hear boom. And then you're probably going to hear like fifths and sevenths and things like that. If that interests you, look up the harmonic series. You'll start to see, you'll learn about harmonics, how they work. And you'll start seeing them sort of pop up in here too. So you have that pure, you have that sine wave with a bit of overdrive, which is saturation in small quantities of overdrive. It's saturation. If you push it hard, it dips into distortion. So see, now you have your upper harmonics coming in if you want to push it a bit more. Yeah, distortion now. So see, that already versus, it's subtle, but it speaks a bit more. Speaking meaning that upper mid-range of the bass sound, it has a bit more clarity to it. You will hear it in a full mix. Now right there, I'd probably start somewhere around there. Then from there, you can play with your envelope. Right now, it's just full sustain. And it has that click because there's no release. So there we go. Now let's say I wanted something a bit more pulse, 808-ish kind of style. Bring the decay down, bring the sustain down, get rid of it, or just bring it slightly down. Yep, see? So just from that, sine wave, subtle saturation, and messing around with the envelope, get kind of a pulsy 808 sound, jungly. Think New Tone does it a lot. You can push it a bit more. All right, now that's with the sine wave. Remember, we can get a bit more character if you use a triangle wave, but it does add that more highs to it. You can filter these out if you want, or you can keep it in a busy mix. It might not matter too much, or it might add just the kind of character you want. Again, simple sounds, affecting them slightly, saturation. This really is the basics. That's why I'm harping on it so much. You don't want that top end in there. Pick a low pass filter. It still has some of that mid-range grit around the 200, 500 area. I'm looking at the, still there. It's not going to overpower your mix. It's going to help speak a bit more and have a bit more power. So that really is the basics of things. If you want a bit more oomph or a bit more evenness, depending on what kind of sound it is, you can add some compression. I often just turn the compressor on, or maybe do something a bit more heavy-handed, something like camel fat, like a one knob kind of deal, where you increase it until you get the punch and the impact you want. Let's take off the little pulsing effect, which is the envelope, and just have a steady sine wave, or steady sound. Now from here, I would honestly use this just as a bass line. Like bass line as in the bass, like bass treble, whatever, bass instrument, and bass line as a starting patch to move from. Would go for some portamento, so sliding. I would do that just because I like how that sounds. It makes the wave, it makes the sound a bit more connected to me. That's like your basis to move from. For examples of sounds like this, like I was saying before, any new tone track, Tides is a good one. If you look on YouTube, he has a Future Music breakdown of that song. All it really is a triangle wave with a little bit of saturation. And again, the envelope in a way so that pulses a bit, and that is it. And I don't know why I racked my brain over that so much when it really is that simple. If you want something a bit more of a that's not an old tune, but something a bit more current, Galaxy also has a Future Music tutorial where they go over She Sings With Me. Same thing, sine wave, a bit of saturation, and I think like they layer it with like an upright bass, which we'll get to later, to add a bit more character. But it really is that simple. It is liquid. It's more about the ideas and the musicality than going crazy with the bass. That's just kind of how it is. What about from there? What do we want to do? Add a bit more interest. So we have this sound, and while you're listening to it, it might not be as compelling as you think. But in a full mix, you're not going to be listening to this bass. You're going to feel it. It's going to carry the tune with its weight and being the foundation of the track. But you're not going to be like, yeah, that that bass sounds really, anything. That's not the point. Stick a piano on top and a think break. You're not going to care about the bass. So what if we add like a little phaser in there? Just turn it on. It's a bit much, but it's starting to add some movement. So what if we bring down the signal so it's mostly dry? There's a bit of movement in there. And I'm just kind of messing with things to kind of get a sound I like, a bit more movement. Now you're going to want to bring that width in because the phase is going to add unnecessary, phase differentiations, but width to it. And at this point, staying simple again, we can go into layering and stereo basses and things like that later. But just for the foundation, you're going to want a strong mono sound that has a bit more character. Now let's try a chorus, no phaser. Again, chorus is going to make it wide. That's the basis of a chorus. To double, slightly change the pitch. We'll make it mono. Bit more subtle movement. See, if I had, I was going to say if I had the choice between a phaser or a chorus, and we always do, I would go with the chorus. Because the movement is a bit more subtle. It's going to be as if I copied this patch over and just slightly detuned it, but a few times, that kind of ideal. Somebody who uses choruses on their bass sounds a lot is LSB. He's got a few tutorials on YouTube, just LSB Masterclass. He often does this, just basic kind of sine wave, saw wave, whatever. Put a chorus on it, filter it down. It really is that. And if there's anybody in like the liquid realm who I think everyone should kind of look for to model after, is LSB. He's really good at that. His basses are always really full, strong in the low end. Obviously their bass, I don't know what I'm saying. They carry the tune very well. The bass is there. You feel it on a big system. It's got that chest, that weight, that body moving, Anyway. It's late. My analogies are running thin. It's subtle movement. You can see the waves on the spectrometer. Just moving slightly. So again, that's a sine wave. Bit of saturation. Chorus thrown on. Make sure it's mono. That would actually help with the movement as well. And a little bit of compression. And it's low passed. Again, It's not that deep, but for some reason this feels tricky sometimes, because when you're looking up things about how to do this, there's nothing. There's like, here's what a synth is, let's twist some knobs and see what it does. And then there's how to recreate dead limit by Noisier, but there's barely anything in the middle, you know? So, things I do for you guys. Again, you're probably skipping around this video quite a bit, but I'm harping these staples, basically, these basics to get down. Sine wave, triangle wave, something like that is a basis. Saturation, add a little bit of extra whatever you want to taste. Chorus, phaser, compression. You can even add reverb sometimes depending on what kind of bass sound it is, but it's iffy. That comes down to preference. You're gonna have to experiment with that. So let's see what we got so far with this progression. Yep. Now I have another one. Now we're going to take the same bass sound. Now we're going to make the 808 style sound. See, even there, it's a bit less pronounced, but the movement is still there. The character is still there. Those upper harmonics that we are getting from the chorus and from the distortion, saturation are in there. And it's adding that much more character to it, a bit more movement, and upper harmonics for perceived low end. So like small speakers, things like that, earbuds. While it might not recreate fully all the way down to like 40, 30 hertz around there, psychoacoustically, it makes you feel like all that's there. Again, not going to go into depth about that. You can look it up. There's a ton of articles. Mike has a really good video on that. London Electricity in his Facebook videos, if you dig, or on YouTube, has a really good video about this as well. That's kind of how I learned it, because again, there's not much out there. Now, let's go back to that other patch and let's introduce some faux harmonics. So I'm saying fake harmonics, so 7th, 5th, octave, things like that. But what if we just copy this over? Let's patch over to oscillator 2. You can do this in any plugin, by the way. And maybe we add an octave. So now, yeah. If I take off all of these, now you have two spikes. You have the low note, which is oscillator 1, and the high, which is oscillator 2. That could add some faux harmonics. It's like it's adding in an octave, but you're specifically doing it instead of like adding saturation. Or what if we want to go to, instead of just an octave, we say go a 7th up. So that's 7 semitones. Lots of people do this. Again, faux harmonics, you're adding the 7th, adding a bit more character up there, and it turns into an interval instead of a single note. A chord would be 3 pitches, an interval is just 2. You can do 7th, you can do 5 semitones, or 5 notes. These aren't semitones, actually. So this would be like playing C and G at the same time. You can put that up an octave as well. So an octave and a 7th. Now you get that kind of Korg M1 kind of show me love sound. See where I'm going with this? Now, well, let's do our other thing that we were doing before. Add a bit of saturation. That's a bit much for this sound. Ooh, now we got a good spot here. Chorus. Pulse sound, let's make it straight. Okay, there we go. That's a good amount of movement. It's a good amount of character. It's a lot of clarity up in the high end, but it still has that weight. Compression, under the matter. Filter it down. For an example of this kind of bass sound where it's like the fundamental and the seventh. So this kind of, or faux harmonics, whatever you call it, kind of an idea I'm trying to put through is Fred V and graphics around like the 2010, 2011, like when they were like new and huge on the scene, like that kind of sound where everyone was doing really around that time. You hear a lot of bass sounds like that. It has a ton of weight. The thing is, it also takes up a lot of room in the spectrum, especially when you have drums and things going on. So you might have a more bass driven tune like this, but if you make it a bit more subtle, see, it's in there, but it's not overpowering to where this is straight up in your face. Then turn it down, just the volume on that one oscillator. See, it's still there in the spectrum analyzer, and you still feel it, you still hear it, it still adds interest, there's movement, all that good stuff we've been talking about. Again, add a piano on top, think break, caliber. Not quite, but you know what you're starting to get what I'm saying. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Now, for even more interest, this is where you can start to add layering. We're not going to go too deep into layering, but just for something subtle. Let's say I have this bass sound, right? Let's take out that harmonic thing that I was doing. It's not, okay, just for clarity, it's acting as a harmonic. I'm adding in an extra note, so it's actually playing two notes at the same time, but the way I'm using it is so subtle that you'd get that note out of there if I were to saturate it a bit more heavily, maybe add a peak in an EQ to highlight that frequency, that kind of thing. But that is easier, it's more controlled, just to add another oscillator, put it to seventh or fifth, same octave or higher octave, and you're good, you're golden. But let's take this sound now. Nice bit of movement from our chorus, saturation, triangle wave, sine wave. I'm gonna keep saying it. Now, what if we add a piano, Labs piano? It doesn't really matter a specific one, or just low piano sound, or any kind of keyboard sound for this experiment. Okay, now forgive me for, well, not me, I didn't make the piano, but piano does come in a bit late because the way it's sampled. Now, this is probably going to take you a bit more out of the plugins, but again, low pass filter, that's all I'm asking you for. And maybe high pass, just to get rid of that gross low end, because the sub is what we want. We want that the characters of the mids, the highs, and everything else on that piano to taste, basically. See, it adds a bit more of the upper range interest. In a full mix, you probably won't hear the difference. But when you won't hear specifically the difference. But if I took it out, you'd miss it, that kind of thing. Now here you have a piano is stereo. If you want, you could make it mono. No big deal at this point. But again, see right there, just pull the volume down a bit. And that's added interest. No biggie. So you can go to Contact and the free Contact player. So it'll be Contact 5 player. And then you're going to go to Factory Library. You're going to go Double Bass Solo. This is free, by the way. Just go and download Contact player. So then you want to select pizzicato. Play the right thing. Take all that reverb out. You can add a bit more back in later to taste, if you like. It's a stereo sound. Again, it's to taste. So if you don't want it to be stereo, cool. If you do, cool. Now let's add that in as well. Bit loud. Again, we're just trying to layer, add a bit more character to the sub sound. Yep. You can hear it in there now. Now bring that down. I do a little bit of courtesy EQ on this bass sound, on this upright bass, string bass. There's a lot of harmonic content in a string instrument. Just think of it as a whole lot of saw waves, almost. So again, this is going to be to taste how much like upper string slap and hiss you want in there. Me personally, I like to compress like upright basses pretty hard to really get a lot of character out of them. If you listen to, what was it, Home Alone, my tune, it's not really the liquid kind of example I would normally go for, but I usually process them the same way, which is very heavily, and I'll filter it down. That one is very much balls to the wall as far as like compression and distortion goes, and EQing out specific notches and adding in different frequencies or accenting different frequencies for movement and things. But the idea is still the same. It's a lot of subtle stacking EQs and saturation and things like that to get the specific character that you want. I hope this is making any kind of sense. So that right there is good. Now let's do our pulsing thing. So 808 kind of style. So I'm going to switch the envelope again. And now you can get to add a bit more character, because the upright bass is a sampled sound. You can play it at different velocities. So, and it'll do different things. Like if I hit a key hard, it'll sound differently than I hit it softly, as if I'm playing the instrument. So I can do something like that. This is just for example's sake. It's probably gonna sound terrible. Yeah, and see, every note it just kind of ups the intensity of the upright bass, adding a bit more interest, a bit more movement, a bit more character. Again, subtlety, that's all it is. And like we did with the sine wave or the synth bass, for the upright bass, I would do a bit more, like I said, compression, some saturation. Again, Camel Crusher, Camel Fat is your friend, something subtle, simple. And there is basically it. That's it. That really is it. That's all I do for basically all my like bass sounds, to where they're not the focus, you know? You can go into, like, even if you say you want to make a Reece, right? We all do this. Or I mean, it's liquid. Of course you want to make a Reece, right? To init the patch, clear it. Cool. Sine waves, right? Or saw waves. Dummy. All right, let's add, you can literally just add another one. If we're going for basic Reece, again, basic sounds. We got two oscillators going at the same time. Now we're going to detune one of them. And it all depends on the movement you want. I low pass them. Bit more. Yeah, okay. So all that is two saw waves. One's detuned against the other one. It's about a half a semitone off. Yep. Now, what we do the other one, subtle saturation. Maybe a chorus. Now this is making it wide. You can experiment with maybe doubling the patch and layering that. A high pass one that's a bit more wide, while you have a one that's dead mono and the other one's wide. You can layer this with a sine wave on another patch, just for a bit of added weight. Like what if we played these together? So that's the patch we did first. So that's that. And the Reece. It's starting to get a little busy, but there's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of weight. I would honestly use this. I would EQ it a bit more so the harmonics and things aren't overlapping, because they will start fighting against each other, and you'll start getting more complex waveforms. You can see down on the spectrum analyzer. Again, that the the more complex waveforms are these upper harmonics and these other pitches that are starting to kind of rise up. And that is the character, that is the added sauce you want to things. Compression on the Reece. Honestly, this is usable how it is. I balance the levels a bit more. Yeah. Again, subtleties. Now we're starting to layer things. So like a more Reece type sound, a lot of character. It won't have as much low end, but if you layer it on top of a sine wave, triangle wave, a bit of saturation, some other stuff, like I was saying before, and then you'll start to get a more full sound with movement, body, weight, all that good stuff. And from there, if I were to process it even more, I would usually bust these both together. They're already in there because this is my starting template. And I'd add a bit of compression there, EQ it, a bit more saturation on specific ranges with like Fab Filter Saturn or something like that, or Isotope Trash, affect it a bit more. Again, just a little bit to squeeze out some flavors, some harmonics. I'm not trying to recreate or do anything too heavy to it, you know. Bit of salt and pepper, a bit of butter, a bit of sugar, you know, just to add something else to the palate. Food analogies work with synthesis and music production very well, as you know, because I say it all the time. But anyway, so just, I can honestly stop there because past that, it's up to what you want to do. So just to recap. So again, pick your favorite synth, whatever it might be. Start with a sine, triangle wave, something like that. You can experiment with others, but those two are probably going to give the most weight when you want a simple foundation style basic bass that will add the bottom end to the tune. Yeah, start there. You want to add a bit of interest, add some saturation, experiment with the chorus to even the sound out and to make it a bit more consistent. Compression is your friend. Nothing too technical, one knob style like Camel Fat or Camel Crusher. It's basically the same thing. Can help you out quite a bit. You can remember detuning a little bit. Can add some movement in between sounds. If you say detune your oscillators quite a bit. The Reece effect is just detuning, adding your faux harmonics or your fake harmonics, but intentional ones by adding another oscillator, but putting it on the octave up or seventh or fifth or combinations of the two can get you more character to the sound. Yeah. Then layering acoustic sounds such as piano or a string bass or just keys like a Wurlitzer or a Rhodes or bass guitar. High passing them a bit so the low end doesn't conflict with the solid low end, the synth bass, and then affecting that to taste with the same ideas of saturation, movement, be it a chorus, detune, phasers, things like that, a bit of compression. Compress them together a little bit. Again, subtlety. I know I've harped on this for however long this video is, but once you get these steps down, it's 5 minutes to get a basic sound. The rest of your life to get whatever kind of sound you want. It really is 5 minutes, and then however long you want to take, and then slap a think break in a piano, boom, maybe a vocal from Splice, and you're good. And that really is that textbook classic liquid bass sound, or that's the basis to get to that sound. You will carve your own thing. You'll come up with your own sound, your own character, your own idea of what you want as you experiment, but these really are the basic steps to get there. I don't often say this is the way to do something, but this really is the way. It's the basics. It's like if you want to make music, turn on your DAW. You can't really dispute that. But what happens afterwards, you can't, So give this a shot. If you have some questions, always reach out to me. yeah, I hope this is useful. Hope this kind of gives you an idea of honestly how simple this is, but how complicated it can be if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of really carving a specific sound. Yeah, the world is your oyster. I don't know why I said that analogy, or that analogy is supposed to apply to, but you can literally do whatever you want. So give it a shot. I'll stick this patch up on Patreon. Not that it really matters. Maybe make a few patches. If you download the Liquid Subs sample pack I did a while back, Bandcamp, Patreon, if you want to grab it. It's all following things like this, except I do process it a bit more heavily to get out like the specific movements and harmonics and things like that. And that comes with experimentation. Experimentation comes in time. Yeah, crack a lot of eggs to make an omelet. You'll figure it out. But I hope this helps. See you in the next one. Always leave suggestions on Patreon. David, I hope this helps. Here you go.